Let's start chemical control and coordination. About the endocrinology, about the hormones, the chemical coordination and integration. So here about some introduction about the endocrine glands. May have from above the diencephalon, epithalamus, that is having pineal gland. That hypothalamus is connected to the pituitary gland. The neck region will find thyroid on either sides. You can see parathyroid gland, and the thymus is one of the gland with the ventral side of the heart. We can see the abdomen will find the pancreas, and above the kidney, adrenal gland, and the testis and ovary, which are said to be the accessory endocrine glands along with the reproductive system, which they are even working for that to secrete the different kinds of hormones. Let's see the endocrinology here that include endocrine glands and their secretion. What is a hormone? Hormone means the non-nutrient chemical that act as intercellular messengers and are produced in trace amounts, very small amounts. They are non-nutrient chemical, they act as intercellular messengers and they are going to be produced in trace amounts, very, very small amount, but their work is the more and highly efficient. How does that? We said the cyclic amplification mechanism. Then that these are the endocrine glands that you can see in the diagram. Let's take one after another. Hypothalamus, pituitary, that pineal gland, thyroid, parathyroid, thymus, adrenal, pancreas, and gonads. So when it comes to the hypothalamus, that neurosecretory cells of the hypothalamus is going to secrete that hormones, releasing hormone, inhibiting hormones, and oxytocin and vasopressin. Releasing hormones and inhibiting hormones, their function we discussed in the earlier class. So then oxytocin and vasopressin, they are from neurohypophysis. They are going to store in the neurohypophysis of the pituitary gland. Let's go with the text diagram here. This is the pattern. The hypothalamic neurons that we discussed this earlier, that hypothalamic neurons are going to secrete that particular releasing hormone or inhibiting hormone. We took the example like GHRH, growth hormone, releasing hormone released from the hypothalamic neuron, goes to the capillaries of the hypothalamus, blood vessel, and the capillaries of anterior pituitary, they get the release and stimulate the anterior pituitary for the secretion of growth hormone. If the growth hormone levels are increased in the blood, that information goes to the hypothalamus, and the hypothalamus release the inhibiting hormone from the hypothalamic neuron through the blood capillaries of the hypothalamus, the blood vessel, and the blood capillaries of the anterior pituitary. They reaches to the anterior pituitary and stop the secretion of growth hormone. That means the balancing, the growth hormone releasing hormone, growth hormone inhibiting hormone, releasing from the hypothalamus, going to balance and control the secretions of growth hormone in case of anterior pituitary. You have to remember everything same, like whatever the hormone of anterior pituitary, they're all regulated by the hypothalamic neurons by growth hormone, the releasing hormones and inhibiting hormone. For example, if we take one more TSH, TSH-RH, TSH-IH. Hypothalamic neurons are going to secrete. TSH is from anterior pituitary. TSH-RH, TSH-IH from here. ACTH from anterior pituitary. ACTH-RH, ACTH-IH. Likewise. That we discussed in the earlier class. Then hypothalamic neurons, whose axons are traveling along the length and reaches to the posterior pituitary neurohypophysis of the pituitary gland. There, oxytocin and vasopressin are going to be stored over. What do you say? The statement for this: the hypothalamic neuron secreted oxytocin and vasopressin travel along the length of hypothalamo-hypophyseal tract and reaches to the neurohypophysis. These are the issues we learned. In the NCRT, it was given like this: they are transported axonally and stored in the pituitary. Which part? That posterior pituitary, neurohypophysis. So talking about the pituitary gland, the smallest endocrine gland, located in a bony cavity called sella turcica. Sella turcica, the word to remember. that it is attached to the hypothalamus by a stalk or infundibulum. It has two portions. What are they? Adenohypophysis or anterior pituitary, and neurohypophysis or posterior pituitary. The adenohypophysis has two portions. What are they? The pars distalis, pars intermedia, that you can see in the diagram here. These are all the portions of the pituitary, pars distalis and pars intermedia. We know that pars nervosa belongs to neurohypophysis. Tuberculosis is rudimentary in case of human being. The mostly developed is distalis. You may see this intermedia almost merged with the distalis. That means adenohypophysis, neurohypophysis. This kind of classification based upon the embryonic formation. When it comes to the adult, we just make the lobes here. When we observe the lobes, this is pars distalis, pars intermedia, and you can see the pars nervosa as well as the small portion pars tuberalis, and connected to the hypothalamus through infundibulum. So about the pars distalis, anterior pituitary, we usually term it as the hormones are said to be somatotropin or growth hormone, prolactin, and thyroid stimulating hormone, adrenocorticotropic hormone ACTH, luteinizing hormone called LH, and follicle stimulating hormones. Throughout the length of endocrinology, the very important thing here, you need to know the gland and their secretion, hormone and their function. So if you can catch this, if you can able to do this, 80% of endocrinology is over, that's all. And the remaining applications we discussed in the earlier class. That application-based question, the transport mechanism, we discussed in the earlier class. Somatotropin or growth hormone function, they are for body growth. Then the disorders also play a vital role in the endocrinology. That hypersecretion of the growth hormone causes gigantism, abnormal growth. We say the hypersecretion leads to gigantism, which is called abnormal growth. Hyposecretion in children, both cases in children itself, that below 18 or 20 age, that hypersecretion of GH causes dwarfism, that stunted growth. The two contrast issues you are now observing here only. That during growing ages, hyposecretion, dwarfism, hypersecretion, gigantism. The excess secretion of the growth hormone in adult, what happens after 2022? That when growth is completed, at the time when growth hormone is released in large amount, that mainly in the middle age, causing acromegaly. You can see here that the disfigurement of the, especially the face, that more protrusion of the jaws you can see in this particular diagram. Acromegaly, which leads to a serious complications and may lead to the death also, premature death. The disease is hard to diagnose in early stages, but may be undetected for many years. Now that hormones of the pars distalis, prolactin, which regulates the growth of mammary glands and the formation of milk, TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone, which stimulate the thyroid gland for the secretion of thyroxine, ACTH, adrenocorticotropic hormone, going to stimulate the adrenal cortex. It is going to stimulate the adrenal cortex, which makes the secretion of the hormones of the adrenal cortex. It's a huge area, like glucocorticoids, mineralocorticoids, and sex corticoids. So then hormones from the pars distalis, luteinizing hormone, we say LH, that stimulates the gonadial activity. In males, very important, just see here, the statement questions will come for us, that luteinizing hormone in the male stimulates the synthesis and secretion of androgens from testes. In female, it induces the ovulation and maintain the corpus luteum. Then likewise, follicle stimulating hormone stimulates the gonadial activity. In males, FSH and androgens regulate spermatogenesis. In female, FSH stimulates the growth and development of the ovarian follicle. As I said to you, in the based on the functions, you need to recognize the hormone. Now the hormones of pars intermedia. That pars intermedia almost merged with the pars distalis here. That is, this is the intermedia that almost merged with the pars distalis. It produces a hormone called melanocyte stimulating hormone. That MSH acts on the melanocytes to regulate the pigmentation of the skin. MSH is said to be antagonistic to the melatonin. What is melatonin will come now. Neurohypophysis, as we said, that hypothalamic neurons are going to secrete the two hormones where they are going to store here in the neurohypophysis, that pars nervosa. Then that oxytocin, in that first of all oxytocin for the contraction of the smooth muscle at the end of gestation during the parturition process. In female, it stimulates the contraction of uterus at the time of childbirth, what is called that parturition, and milk ejection from mammary gland. Do remember LTH prolactin for the production of milk, oxytocin is for the ejection of the milk, and vasopressin, antidiuretic hormone, that stimulates the reabsorption of the water and electrolytes by DCT of the kidney and thereby reduces diuresis. We call it as facultative water reabsorption. In case the DCT in that ADH hormone is not there, that nearly 10 to 15% of the absorption of the water is possible here in the DCT because of ADH even. So that deficiency of ADH is definitely effect on the kidney. So the conservation of the water, which leads to large amount of water loss along with the dehydration. Water loss means also going to lose from the body. So that's we call it as diabetes insipidus, not to be confused with the insulin. Insulin is this is here diabetes mellitus. Now this in diabetes insipidus we can say. Here in this excess urination you don't find glucose. Only the problem of water reabsorption. Insipidus means tasteless. The meaning of insipidus is tasteless. That means no glucose here. Next, the pineal gland. That it is located on the dorsal side of the forebrain, connected to the epithalamus, as we discussed in the neural control and coordination. Hormone from the pineal gland is melatonin. The functions of melatonin. The diurnal rhythm, we say that circadian rhythm, we use it to call technically. 24-hour day cycle rhythm, we say circadian rhythm, like maintenance of sleep-wake cycle, body temperature regulation. Then it influences the metabolism, pigmentation, menstrual cycle, and also it is for the defense capability. Be careful for these kind of statements here. When it comes in mind, melatonin, when we say immediately what will come in the mind, circadian rhythm. Those people who even prepared hard, they think about these kind of logics, influences our defense capability. So these kind of things. That means that's why in most examinations you'll find that accessory functions will come as a question. That for every hormone will have a when the hormone comes in mind, will immediately will get a particular action like oxytocin, uterus contraction of the uterine muscle. But they have an additional function for that, the rejection of milk also. Likewise, here also the influences our defense capability. For that only I asked you to practice that worksheet. So then thyroid gland, the largest endocrine gland we can say, which include two lobes that on either sides of the trachea, that the two lobes are connected each other by isthmus, a connective tissue. The thyroid gland is composed of follicles, that we say the lobes of the thyroid gland as follicles, and that particular follicular cells are going to secrete a hormone called that thyroxine hormone. By chemical composition, we can classify it into two: T3, triiodothyronine, and T4, tetraiodothyronine. Okay. Then along with that, we'll find one more hormone, that is calcitonin, that parafollicular cells of the thyroid gland. Besides the follicle, some cells are present which they are going to secrete the hormone called calcitonin. So then functions of the triiodothyronine or tetraiodothyronine, mostly T4. The regulation of the basal metabolic rate, physical, mental, and sexual development, support RBC formation. Just keep an eye here, support RBC formation. When I'm stressing means, in this particular area, some students are already failed to cope up in examinations. Sir, I didn't notice that particular in text. While reading, no matter, we'll read just like a reading. But here, where they miss, that's what I am going for. That most of the times, after all full preparation, also we may lose sometimes. That is because these kind of issues. That means when we say thyroxine, immediately BMR will come in mind. Then it also for the physical, mental, sexual development, support the RBC formation, and control metabolism of carbohydrate, protein, and fat, maintenance of water and electrolyte balance. This is also one more because the authorized person is aldosterone, isn't it? From the adrenal gland. But here also we have a sentence in textbook. Thyrocalcitonin. Calcitonin is a protein hormone which regulates the blood calcium levels. Simply we say calcitonin lowers the calcium levels in ECF. That means calcitonin favors the bone, strengthening of the bone. Okay, so then we have the well-known issue here that thyroxine, for the preparation of thyroxine hormone, we need iodine. What happens is if iodine deficiency is seen over, that enlargement of the thyroid gland, that in adult women it causes irregular menstrual cycle. That means we already said that function have that regulating the menstrual cycle. Then hypothyroidism, you can see here, this is a simple goiter disease. We can see the enlargement of the neck region. That what it means here, if you don't supply iodine, that the anxiety and will increase in the particular follicular cells of the thyroid gland. That makes that slowly they'll try to enlarge themselves to increase their area for absorption of the iodine, but iodine won't come. That but they do continuously. That makes enlargement day by day. That particular neck region will find that enlargement. We say simple goiter disease. So then that is a little bit different with the hypothyroidism because here that simple goiter related with iodine deficiency. So hypothyroidism in general we use it to say when thyroxine hormone is reduced. If you don't supply iodine, you can't you'll find the thyroxine hormone. So in that cases, we'll find simple goiter. So now let's talk about the hypothyroidism. May come in hypothyroidism, but we have a separate name, simple goiter. Now, so this particular hypothyroidism, if you see the pregnancy of that during pregnancy, that affects the baby. That newborn baby with stunted growth, is a cretinism, a congenital hypothyroidism, we can say during the birth, giving birth to the child, the mother is facing this kind of hypothyroidism, which leads to the cretin child, congenital hypothyroidism. We can call that as, and you may see that pituitary dwarfism also related to this particular dwarfism, also stunted growth, isn't it? But this is dangerous in case of pituitary dwarfism. No matter, nothing, psychological issues cannot be we'll find over. But here we'll see mental retardation, low IQ, abnormal skin, deaf, mutism even can be expected. That means what I mean, pituitary dwarf is normal except the growth. But that dwarfism in case of hypothyroidism, that is going to be very dangerous here. That additional mental retardation, low IQ, abnormal skin and deaf mutism can be expected over. So then that hyperthyroidism, you people need to list out all the disorders at one place. That if you list out like that, whatever the list you made over, if this kind of list, if you get directly in the examination and math the following, you feel that comfort. You feel that comfort. That means the memory areas you need to make a paper here, a particular worksheet like paper, you have to prepare your own. The abnormal increase of the thyroid hormone resulting in adverse effects on the physiological activity. It is caused due to the development of nodules of the cancer of thyroid gland, sometimes overgrowth. We say nodules. That cancer, we know uncontrolled division. These here are the cells are also uncontrolled divide and make this kind of hypothyroidism. Okay. So what we call this as exophthalmic goiter, Graves' disease, the name of Graves. Exophthalmic goiter. Symptoms, you can see here, the patient with exophthalmic goiter, the protrusion of the eyeballs, increased BMR, weight loss. These people will be hyperactive here. They can't make a position. They can't stand in a particular place. Likewise, hypothyroidism is the contrast. The people become sluggish because of hypothyroidism. We used to say that when a person suddenly increases his weight, he says thyroid problem. What is thyroid problem? Hypo or hyper? You should ask. hypothyroidism, that is actually. That hyperthyroidism, we may see that weight loss. That means loss of weight, you can see. Hypothyroidism, that imbalance makes a sudden increase of the weight of the body also. So moving on, parathyroid gland which secrete a hormone called parathormone. That there are four glands we can see. Why it is called para? Para means a side of what? Thyroid gland, parathyroid gland. The four parathyroid glands are present here. They secrete a hormone called parathormone. If you remember, in thyroid gland, we said a hormone called calcitonin. The calcitonin of thyroid gland is antagonistic to the parathormone of parathyroid gland. Okay, so calcitonin, what we said there, it lowers the calcium levels in ECF. Then what parathormone do? It highes the calcium levels in ECF. ECF nothing but blood or any other fluid of the body. So calcitonin lowers the calcium levels in the blood. Then parathormone highes the calcium levels in the blood. Not to avoid the confusion, not to remember the both, at least one. Like calcitonin lowers the calcium levels in ECF. Automatically parathyroid will be the opposite, isn't it? Then calcitonin lowers the calcium levels in ECF. That means what it is doing, it increasing the calcium levels in the bone. So parathormone, definitely contrast. When decreases the calcium levels in the bone, demineralization, not intentionally. In case when we are not taking the calcium in diet for a longer period of time, if you don't take the calcium to the diet, what calcium do? That first of all, it stimulates the reabsorption of the calcium by the renal tubule. Then it increases the calcium, it encourages the digestive system to absorb more calcium ion. If it all failed over, that calcium is not still sufficient, then what it will go for? It go for the bone resorption, demineralization. That means it will try to take the calcium from the bone. Okay, so that means order first they'll try to absorb the calcium from external issues like digestive food material from the food material makes the activation of vitamin D and also inform to the nephron to absorb the more calcium. Even not sufficient, definitely it will affect on the bone resorption. That's why in case of parathyroid hormone, parathormone, when it is more and more in the blood, we'll find bone related problems. We say stones, bones, groans, moans. No need at present at least. You are going to get that in MBBS. Along with TCT helps in calcium balance. That line we have, that means we said antagonistic each other. Calcitonin and this particular parathormone. In regular class, we used to discuss this. It will take at least 40 to 50 minutes to discuss about the actions of and balance of the thyroxine, calcitonin and parathormone. So now I am going to explain this particular area brief. Thymus gland, child gland we say, location on the dorsal side of the heart and aorta, function that secretes the thymosin, well known for the maturation of the T lymphocytes, isn't it? The differentiation and maturation of the T lymphocytes, which are helpful for the cell-mediated immunity, but this is the additional. Promote the production of antibodies for humoral immunity. It also participates in the humoral immunity by promoting the production of antibodies. You see the exact location of the thymus gland. As we know, the thymus gland is a child gland. That particular gland will be degenerate over a period of time. You can see during the birth, the full gland you can see. Then 10 years old, 25 years, that when it comes to the 50 years, you don't find only traces of the thymus gland you can see. Okay, so in the way that we can see that by age-wise, that particular thymus gland is going to be reduced. That's why we say only it's a child gland. That means if the age is growing, we can't say that maturation of the lymphocytes can be happened. So that's the way we say in general, immune response in the old person is going to be comparatively weak with the younger generation. Adrenal gland, the big area, adrenal gland, cortex and medulla. Nothing to bother about the medulla. Medulla is having only two hormones which are well known even, epinephrine and norepinephrine, fight and flight and fright hormone, we used to say. Should bother about the adrenal cortex. 90% of the students, I observed that they lose marks in adrenal cortex. They feel so I am very good in endocrinology, but they lose marks. You need to practice straight away when you are revising endocrinology. Straight away go to the adrenal cortex and start practicing. The different issues are there. If you take adrenal cortex here, there are three portions: zona glomerulosa, zona fasciculata, zona reticularis. Okay, this is the order actually from outside to the inside: zona glomerulosa, zona fasciculata, zona reticularis. While reading itself, if you remember the order, that will be better. You see, this is the cortex and this is the medulla. In the cortex, when you go for, there are three regions again: zona glomerulosa, zona fasciculata, zona reticularis. This is the arrangement. You can see in the histological view. This is the medulla, lowermost. Then their hormones. Zona glomerulosa is going to secrete mineralocorticoids. Then zona fasciculata, glucocorticoids. Reticularis is for sex corticoids. So moving on with that particular hormones, the glucocorticoids, as we said, from zona fasciculata. See here, when I am saying, I'm not thinking. If you think before examination, with little stress and tension in examination, we lose and we confuse. Okay, that's why I'm saying immediately you need to say zona glomerulosa, mineralocorticoid, zona fasciculata, glucocorticoid, zona reticularis, sex corticoid. Order that should come immediately in the mind, like zona glomerulosa, zona fasciculata, zona reticularis. Actually, when I'm memorizing, that means even lecturer should memorize, that no one will come with by birth. Any subject will come by only practice. When I am practicing, I practice in the order of histology. That means that's why every time when I say, this order will come: zona glomerulosa, zona fasciculata, zona reticularis. And when I remember, when I memorizing this particular, I remember that zona glomerulosa, glomerulus. That means it related with the salts. Even it related mineralocorticoids. Glucocorticoids, mainly cortisol, cortisone, corticosterol, group of hormones are present. Okay, so one hormone we are talking about, that is mainly cortisol. Glucocorticoid, not a single one, it's a group actually, that involved in the carbohydrate metabolism and that stimulate the gluconeogenesis. That means formation of glucose from other substances like lipids. Lipolysis and proteolysis, immunolysis. Lysis means destruction. That means ultimately what we want here in this case, we need to break up the glucose and we need to form the glucose and inhibit the cellular uptake and utilization of the amino acid that maintain the cardiovascular system and kidney functions. Functions even very, very important. Stimulate the RBC production. Do you remember in thyroxine also we did that some involvement in the RBC. The produces anti-inflammatory, very, very regular question. Anti-inflammatory activity and suppress the immune response. It is helpful for graft rejection, isn't it? The rejection of, that means when you are doing the grafting, kidney transplantation in that particular case, that we should inject cortisol to that particular person. Why? Because that anti-inflammatory effect. That means not to reject that particular organ. Adrenal cortex, mineralocorticoids, we are going, regulate the water at body fluid volume. We say mineralocorticoids from zona glomerulosa. The main mineralocorticoid is aldosterone. Well-known function for us. That's why just focus on the cortisol. Aldosterone, we have enough good information already in excretory system. So just focus on the cortisol, who is anti-inflammatory hormone. Likewise, we get the questions. Electrolyte balance, osmotic pressure and blood pressure. That main mineralocorticoid is aldosterone. We stimulate the absorption of sodium and water from the renal tubule and excretion of tubular secretion, we call it as potassium and phosphate ions. Then that disorders we need to go that particular. So before we go that, let's see androgenic corticoids, that is from zona reticularis. They also play some role in the growth of axial hair, pubic hair and facial hair. We call this as secondary sexual characters. Even it, that's why we say androgenic corticoids, sex corticoids we can say. Okay, so deficiency of hormones of the adrenal cortex after alters carbohydrate metabolism. Talking about cortisol, that causing acute weakness and fatigue. The condition we say Addison's disease. This is Addison disease, the patient with Addison disease. And the particular adrenal medulla, we know that this is fight, flight, fright hormone. Adrenaline or noradrenaline. Epinephrine 80%, norepinephrine is going to be 20%. They're rapidly secreted in response to They're rapidly secreted in response to any stress or emergency situation, so-called emergency hormone, we say. Hormones of flight or fright. These increases alertness, pupillary dilation, pile erection, as like sympathetic nervous system. Sweating, heartbeat, and that the contraction of the heart and rate of respiration, breathing rate is going to be increased over, heartbeat increases. You remember all the things happen in case of sympathetic nervous system itself. And stimulate the breakdown of glycogen and their increased glucose in blood. Yesterday in the video we have seen. Also stimulate the breakdown of lipids and proteins. That means I ultimately provide instant energy by waking the glycogen. Epinephrine activity we have seen yesterday in the video. Then pancreas, the composite heterocrine gland. It is mixed gland. We use it to say both exocrine and endocrine portion. 98% is exocrine. We secrete the enzymes required for the digestion. Endocrine is about 2%, that islets of Langerhans, we say that as, that contain alpha, beta, delta, F cells. Alpha cells secrete glucagon and beta cells secrete insulin. Delta cells secrete somatostatin. F cells secrete pancreatic peptide. These are the 4 types of hormone, but mostly focus on insulin and glucagon released from beta and alpha cells respectively. Then alpha cell secrete glucagon, beta cell secrete insulin. They maintain the glucose homeostasis in the blood. So the glucagon, conversion of the glycogen into glucose, that means hyperglycemic factor. What is glycemic? Glucose. Hyperglycemic factor. Glucagon can increase the blood glucose levels. That's why we say hyperglycemic hormone, which acts on the hepatocyte and stimulate the glycogenolysis. Lysis means breakdown. Glycogenolysis, excuse me, resulting in an increased blood sugar. That's what we call the condition hyperglycemia, and hormone is called hyperglycemic hormone, which reduces the cellular glucose uptake and utilization. Contrast function we have with insulin that regulates the glucose homeostasis, acts on hepatocytes and adipocytes to enhance, to take more glucose for the conversion of glucose into glycogen. Then blood glucose levels will be dropped down. Drop what I mean, normal condition. We call hypoglycemic hormone. Insulin is called hypoglycemic hormone. So what is the function? Glycogenesis. Stimulate the glycogenesis. Both will act appropriate based on the necessity and requirement. When you eat the food material, large amount of glucose reached, insulin acts on that. That converts the glucose into glycogen. Imagine if there is no insulin. What happens? There is no insulin. Glucose levels in the blood will increase. Increase of glucose levels in the blood. Excess glucose. We have to eliminate. We have to eliminate means alone we can't eliminate. We need to eliminate through the water. Excess urination. Polyuria. Excess hunger we can face because more whatever there is going on. Polyphagia. Polydipsia. There are basically 3 symptoms we'll have. No matter, just to go through the text here. It is a disorder due to prolonged hyperglycemia. That symptoms, loss of glucose through urine and formation of harmful compounds like ketone bodies. As I remember, diabetes insipidus is the ADH deficiency. Now mellitus. That what's the difference here? There also excess urination without sugar. Here excess urination with sugar. Excess sugar will go along with the urine. So need to put a special focus on the disorders. List out all the disorders in the form of match the following. You'll find the same match the following in examination. Testis, ovary, it's just formality for us, testis and ovary, because testis, we know that androgens is going to secrete. That particular androgen, testosterone, helpful for the development of the secondary sexual characters in male. The cells to be remembered, that Leydig cell are interstitial cells we can see. Then the development of the secondary sexual characters, simply we see. So that regulates the development and maturation and functions of the accessory sex organs like epididymis, vas deferens, seminal vesicle, prostate gland, urethra, that have role in spermatogenesis also. Then stimulate the male sexual behavior, we call libido, the sexual behavior of the male, the growth of muscles, hair, aggressiveness, low pitch voice, all will come because of testosterone. The help in anabolism, that of proteins and carbohydrates, building, not breaking called catabolism. ovary. That exactly want to say that we learned in human reproduction. Theca interna is going to, of Graafian follicle is going to release estrogen hormone, which makes the development of secondary sexual characters in the female. Ovulation results the corpus luteum formation that secrete the progesterone. The actual locations we discussed in human reproductive system. Estrogen and progesterone both are steroid hormones, fat soluble. The functions of estrogen, the growth and activities of the female secondary sex organs and development of ovarian follicle and female secondary sexual characters like high pitch voice and sexual behavior, development of mammary glands. So that's it about the functions of the progesterone. If we come for it, that maintain the pregnancy for 9 months, acts on the mammary gland for the stimulate the formation of alveoli, that acts to store milk and milk secretion. And progesterone is the main hormone here that initially by corpus luteum. After that, you registered, you noticed in the human reproduction that placenta secrete the progesterone, isn't it? So the hormones of the heart, kidney, and gastrointestinal tract, because these are additional one. That means accessory structure. Atrial natriuretic factor is a hormone which inhibit the absorption of water. We discussed in the excretory system. When blood pressure increases, that means when drink more water, that blood pressure will be increased. That stimulate the right atrium of the heart to secrete the ANF, which makes the dilation of blood vessel and thereby reduce the BP, and also for the inhibit the absorption of water. Juxtaglomerular apparatus of kidney. That erythropoietin is a hormone released from the kidney. That for erythropoiesis, that we need to remember. That gastrointestinal tract is having so many hormones like gastrin, secretin, cholecystokinin, pancreogenin, enterocrinin, villicrinin. No matter that first number is not there in text here. The gastrin acts on gastric glands and stimulate the secretion of HCl and pepsinogen. Then to stop that, what is required? Inhibits the gastric secretion is gastric inhibitory peptide. Location, gastrin from stomach, gastric inhibitory peptide from duodenum of the intestine. Secretin, cholecystokinin, except gastrin, make it all. All the hormones are from small intestine only. That the secretin acts on exocrine pancreas and stimulate the secretion of water and bicarbonate ion. The gastric inhibitory peptide, we said inhibit the gastric secretion. Cholecystokinin, which acts on the pancreas and gallbladder and stimulate the secretion of pancreatic enzymes and bile juice respectively. Here the hormonal action we discussed is the detail in earlier video, earlier class. That's why I'm going a little bit here, just I'm closing that brief information. The several other non-endocrine tissues secrete hormones called growth factors that we know. These are essential for the normal growth of tissues and the repairing for regeneration. Okay, so that we need to discuss about that particular hormones based on the chemical nature. So what I am doing here, I'm cutting here. Please log in immediately. That I'm going to stop this.